First, I will say thank you so much to you all for having the foresight and the wisdom to put something like this together to empower and support and uplift and give a voice to women who are in the community, who are of Haitian descent, and who are making a difference in the community, in the workplace, and at home. So I am so proud that you young ladies, beautiful ladies, have come together, put your minds together to put an effort like this together. And so I'm honored to be here. Thank you. So I think I am a loving, God-fearing, kind, generous person who really is moved by an opportunity to help others. I think really that's where, they talk about having a purpose-driven life, and that is where you find your joy and your safe space and where your fulfillment is. And I think for me, that is really being in a place where I can give back and help others. That it's in itself is filling. So I was born here in New York, in Queens. Mamam soutit Port-au-Prince, papam soutit Port-au-Prince. So my mother's from Port-au-Prince, my father's from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I guess I can't say always, but definitely very young. I was probably around 11 years old when I first said, you know what, I want to become a judge. Sometimes I always say, I don't believe in coincidences. I believe that if you go through an experience in life, whether it is a trial, whether it is a triumph, whether it is bitter or sweet, whether it is a good thing or a bad thing, it is not in vain. And if you allow that opportunity to pass and don't figure out what that lesson was about, what that purpose was about, then you allowed it to pass without really gaining what you were supposed to get. And I believe that when you do go through those experiences, it's meant to strengthen you, it's meant to give you compassion, and it's meant to align you with where God intended you to be. And so I was very young. I was 9 years old. I had an older brother, and he went on a youth group trip, and he got in an accident, and he passed away. As a result of that, it sparked a case in Supreme Court, which was a wrongful death suit. And there were some family issues intertwined in that. And so I learned very young how important it was to have an attorney, how important it was to have a voice in the courtroom, someone who can advocate you and speak on your behalf. And I learned how important it was to have a judge that understood the community. And I said, at that age, that, you know what, that job is so important that's what I want to do when I grow up. People are like, yeah, that's nice. Want to become a judge? You don't have any attorneys in your environment, none in your community, but you want to become a judge. That's cute. And eventually you start reacting to how the world sees things and stop listening to your own voice. And I realized that I stopped even telling people that I wanted to become a judge. And eventually I stopped telling myself that I wanted to become a judge. And I had an opportunity because I had always been doing community service work, understanding where my parents came from and, the disconnect between access to programs and resources and certainly legal justice. So I always came back and did community service work. And the opportunity came in 2015 for me to run to become a Kings County Civil Court judge. And again, by the grace of God, I always say, and the support of the community, I was able to be successful and become the first Haitian American elected to civil court in the state of New York. One of the things I said during my swearing in ceremony was that, I'm honored to be the first. And I know as the face of our community that I don't stand alone. When one goes up, we all go up together. But I said, if I'm the last, then I didn't do my job. And so there is another judge elected. She is actually in Supreme Court. So she is the first Haitian American elected to Supreme Court in the state of New York. And her name is Valerie Cartwright. So there are various courts, and a lot of times in our community, we've heard about criminal court, we've heard about family court, civil court, but we've never heard about surrogates court. And surrogates court is throughout the state of New York. Each county has one. So there's one in Brooklyn, and there are two judges that sit in that court. And that court deals with wills, trusts, and estates. So essentially, when your loved ones pass away, we make sure that all of their assets and everything that they worked hard for gets from one generation to the next. We also do guardianships of disabled adults and minors, and as well as adoptions. It is a 14-year term, and it's very significant because when you think about the lifespan of 14 years, you were talking about someone who is maybe like me, who might be caring for parents and planning for their twilight years, and at the same time raising children and thinking about their future. So that 14 years makes a big difference in crafting a community, in making sure that the needs of the community are met during that time frame. In some judges, you are either appointed by the mayor or governor, or are elected by the people. And so some of those elections, similar to city council or the Brooklyn Borough president, some of them are countywide, it's all of Brooklyn, and some are just a neighborhood, a district. So my current position now from 2015 was a district rate. So it was 4 or 5 neighborhoods together, but surrogate court is countywide. So it's Sheepshead Bay, it's Williamsburg, it's Bushwick, it's Brownsville, it's all of Brooklyn. I am a candidate for Kings County's surrogate court. And recently we went through petition season. That's the process you go through to make sure that you are truly a candidate and on the ballot, where you go out into the community and you ask for signatures. And so we just completed that process, and we were able to get 17,000 signatures. So I'm officially a candidate on the ballot for the June 22nd election. So I have a very strong faith in God. And I believe that, and some instances have taught me that as far as you may want to stray, life, they say life, the universe, the atmosphere, God has a way of bringing you to where he intends you to be. And usually that place, that thing, usually has nothing to do with you and everything to do with an opportunity to help and serve other people. And so I have, like, I think most people have gone through some experiences where you're like, wow, you know what? I let that opportunity close because I either didn't go for it, or maybe I didn't think I was good enough, or maybe I just said, you know what? That just seems like it's too much. I'm going to leave that alone. But, even with that one door closed, there's always an avenue that leads you to where you're supposed to be. And I'll say, I mentioned that part of my process when I was younger was going through different courts, and family court was one of them. And so when I went to law school, I stayed away from family law because I said, this is going to be too much. But and I ran to become a Kings County civil court judge. But when you work for the state, whether you're appointed or elected, they put you where the need is. And so oftentimes the need is in criminal court and family court because they can't afford to have a backlog, because the civil liberties are at stake. It's either you might be incarcerated or your family, children, loved ones are at stake. And so I became a Kings County civil court judge. And my first assignment was in family court. And my first assignment was in Queens Family Court. The same place that I said, I finally made it. I made it. I'm an attorney. That was good enough. I stopped saying, the whole judge thing. But my first assignment was there. And I said, you know what? All right, God. And I'll tell you, this journey also to become a Kings County Circuit Court was not something that I was had on the plan of things to do. This seat is available because the judge who currently is in that seat, she's retiring. So the seat is open. But the pandemic hit, and so many people in Black and brown communities in disproportionate numbers died. Just like that.
Wow.
No opportunity to say goodbye. So you know there was no opportunity to plan for death. And so that court was always instrumental to the community, but that court has become so important because our community is at the doorsteps of that court now. And so the seat became available, and there were people in the community, some community leaders who said, you know what, that seat is open and we think you should run for it. And I said, oh, I don't know. It's countywide. You know, I have the district seat. My term is up in 2025. It's a lot. But when time passed and to see how many of my neighbors, my church family, the community at large was affected by the pandemic, you know, I really was moved to run. And just knowing my personal experience of my parents being Haitian immigrants, coming here with very, very humble beginnings, but rich in hope, faith, determination, hard work, you know. So everything that they did was so that I would have a different upbringing. And not that I grew up in any lap of luxury, but I most certainly didn't have the same upbringing that my parents had. And so that court to me has everything to do with preserving their legacy and everything that they worked for. So I really loved family court. And so people are always saying, when I say that, they're like, oh, I don't know, because it can be the Wild Wild West. You know, you're talking about people who are in their most vulnerable state, coming through the process, scared, frustrated, often in need of protection because we do a lot of domestic violence cases there. But that was the most fulfilling job I've ever had in life. The opportunity to be in a position to really make a difference in somebody's life immediately, as in every day, you know, you're impacting somebody's life tremendously, is a huge honor. It is very scary also. I mean, I've had times where I'm praying over my cases. I'm praying over the families that are in front of me, making sure, hoping that I did the right thing, you know, driving home at night and think, where is that kid right now? And did I do the right thing? It does seem like I am working a lot. And mostly now in the middle of this campaign, I'm eat, breathe, sleeping that. Because the election is June 22nd and counting down the days on the calendar. But I really enjoy spending time with family, like, you know, kick back, you know, popcorn, watching movies. And, you know, the pandemic taught us so much about what really matters. So, you know, we use the word essential worker, essential, and it really did teach us that, because when the world shut down and there was nowhere to go, there was nowhere to get dressed up there was no suit, there was no necklace. All you really had were the things that you worked for. And life is challenging, very challenging, right? So sometimes we work for things, relationships with people, family, spouse, loved ones, sometimes that's challenging and they don't work the way you may intend it to, but it really taught me that those are the things that matter most. My church has an organization called Mount Lebanon Cares, and they do a lot of community service work. I'm also active with the Haitian American Lawyers Association. And so I think this opportunity is a great way to bring awareness to this bar association. So a bar association is an organization of lawyers. And so Halani is what we call it. The Haitian American Lawyers Association of New York is an organization of Haitian American lawyers working here in New York. And Halani is actually, Hala, I should say, is nationwide. So there are several states that has this organization. They're in Boston, Florida, New Jersey. And so this is a great platform for me to bring awareness to the Haitian American Lawyers Association. You can find us online, and we do programs now that everything is virtual. We do programs online. And so we'd love to have everyone, participate. So I think some of them are what you anticipate and what any person of color in a field where they are striving to do something faces similar challenges, right? There's some level of you have to be bigger, better, brighter, period.
Uh-huh.
There are some places that you go, you do not have the luxury of being mediocre. You do not have the luxury of being average. You do not have the luxury of dressing down. Because when you walk in the room, there is already a presumption. And so you have to come in that much harder, stronger, vibrant, brilliant in all those areas. So some of the things that you expect, I experienced them as an attorney, in terms of having the requisite respect from your colleagues, walking into a room and being misidentified as someone other than the lawyer who's here for the case.
Yes.
And then certainly on the bench, I experienced that. And I think on top of that, it was coupled with my age. And I'm older than I look, especially, we're not in person. If we were in person, you might be able to see a little bit more than what I'm trying to hide. But, that the age factor, I think, also played a big role in, the idea that you really have to prove yourself that much more. And so those are the challenges. I think also when you are the first of anything, then that you are speaking on behalf of a group. And I don't take that lightly, and I don't take the position that that's not my job. But absolutely, you meet me and you may not have encountered a Haitian person before that intimately. You might have seen them, they're in the community, what have you, but never that intimately as your colleague, shoulder to shoulder during the judges conference, but it creates an opportunity to bring awareness to others about your community. So that way, if they're in a position of power to make decisions over your community, they have more information, because information and education is power. That is the thing that really breaks down discrimination. Because I think the more we are educated about each other and about each other's cultures and goals, I think the more we will realize how much we actually are alike, that we want the same things for our kids. We want good education, housing. We want an opportunity to prosper. You'll be surprised what you are capable of. Fear is usually the thing that stops us. And we talk about that all the time. God doesn't give us a spirit of fear and confusion or what have you. But, just the idea of doing it with fear. And I used to think, well, I do these things, these different programs, and I'm in the community, whatever. But something sometimes holds me back. And I think courage sometimes is that thing, the courage that, you're powerful, there's some things you've done in life, you graduated or you're in school or you're working and going to school at the same time. So that there is some power in you, some drive in you, but courage seems to be the thing that stops us from that next step. Okay. I think it goes back to what I started with in terms of a purpose-driven life, and really not discounting the good and the bad things. And sometimes in our journey to figure out what our purpose is, we have to take an inventory of our life experiences. And so if you are sometimes your purpose is obvious. If you can sing, you came out the womb like a hummingbird, then those things become obvious. If you're an artist and you can draw and somebody put a pen in your hand and all of a sudden it was a Picasso, then, those talents are obvious. But sometimes that purpose, that talent, that skill set, that compassion that you have, or that burning desire to do something is born out of some experience. And so if you're still on the journey to figuring out what your purpose is, one of the things I would encourage you to do is take an inventory of your life experiences, because I'm going to go stronger than that. I stand firm in the belief that somewhere in that, whatever your legacy, but your story is always tied into other things, right? It's tied into my mother, it's tied into my father, it's tied into my siblings. But whatever life has taken you thus far, somewhere in that you'll find pieces of your purpose. On June 22nd, if you live in Brooklyn, anywhere in Brooklyn, there is an election, and that election encompasses a lot of different positions. The mayor is running, city council is running, public advocate is running. All of these positions are opening up. But don't forget the judges. And oftentimes the judges are at the bottom, and so many people are running now. It might be on the third page on the back, lower right-hand corner. But do not leave that poll site on June 22nd, or if you go through early voting the 2 weeks before June 22nd, do not leave that poll site unless you look for the name Judge Paul. Do not leave the poll site. So I'm asking for your vote and support on June 22nd. If you live in Brooklyn, vote for Judge Dweynie Esther Paul for Kings County Surrogate Court. And after you go to the polls and you vote, then I need you to leave the polls. I need you to call 5 people. 5 moun, zami, mami, papa, sœur, cousin, même si vous fâché avec you moun, releo, and tell them to go to the polls and vote for Judge Paul for Kings County Surrogate Court.